Welcome everyone to another CTC software webinar. My name is Sean Zerbis, the Director of BIM Development here at CTC Software, and today I'm very excited to kick off a series that I've been long awaiting to do. We're going to be talking about the CTC Analytics Learning Series here today, and this is installment 1, talking about installing and configuring the HIVE Project Activity Logger, or we affectionately call PAL. And so we're going to go through that process today. Now, of course, as always, our webinars are recorded. We do this so you can always come back to view them in the future. If you're viewing this on our YouTube channel in the future, thank you very much for that. We hope to earn your subscription today, and perhaps a like, and whatever, all the things. Those of you who are participating with us live in the webinar today, we encourage you to ask questions about today's topic while we're going through the concepts. If you have any questions, throw them in the questions window. I try to answer them live. And we also save the questions and answers session for the end in case I can't answer a particular question live and it's better served in an after session. So we'll do that later. So without further ado, let's jump in and take a look at today's session, what we're going to actually be talking about. So in our modern culture, truly, data is king. I mean, Google fights for data, Amazon fights for data, Microsoft fights for data, Facebook fights for data. Everybody's trying to get your data, right? That's the goal. But we ourselves, we have data. And what's really more important is if we have the ability to make data-driven decisions, if we can harness the data that we develop, that we create, especially in our daily practice and our modeling efforts, this can empower us to be significantly more productive. It helps us better direct our spending efforts, whether it be spending our time, whether it be spending our design budgets, whatever, in more appropriate directions, rather than just throwing it away and emotionally making decisions that maybe aren't the best for our teams, right? So the whole goal here is that information, when used correctly, can really help us be better informed and make better decisions, assuming we take the proper actions for that. So in this installment, this first installment, we're going to be talking about the intricacies of configuring the project activity logger portion. Now, why that first? PAL serves as the backbone for everything that we deal with for project-specific data in the analytics and reporting. It harnesses things like open times and sync to central times. It harnesses warnings. It harnesses file sizes and computers people are working on, where they're spending their time, which views they happen to be in. This tool is so important for harnessing information about the health of our project models. And really, it's not so difficult to configure. It's just important that it's done right. And when done right, you can start just passively harnessing a ton of information so that in future steps in this series, you'll have some data to begin working with. So I encourage you to follow along today and try this for yourself. Some of this you may already have configured, and that's fantastic. But if you don't, that's okay. I'm going to go from the beginning, from zero, ground zero, and we're going to walk through the actual installation, exploring pretty much everything you need to know about downloading, installing, and configuring PAL so that hopefully you leave today with the confidence in how to set up and harness the data from your projects in future reports, okay? So for the learning objectives, we're going to try to cover 4 things. We're going to master the whole PAL config thing for HIVE analytics. I'm going to use the term PAL mostly here, but I might slip up once in a while and say the term HIVE. HIVE is the whole entire suite that encompasses a lot of these data tools and content management systems and activity logging and project standard stuff. So HIVE is the suite. PAL is specifically the tool within the suite that we're focusing on for today's session. So we're going to download and install the project activity logger. We are going to ensure that it's set up correctly so we can make sure we don't have incomplete information. I'm going to talk about what that means. And we're going to verify that we have successful data logging so that in the future, when we go through and actually try to get information, we know that we have data harnessed. We're going to cover all of that. Before I really jump into the meat of today, though, I want to make sure that I'm outlining for you where we're going with this series so you know what's up and coming. So let's go through a quick little series roadmap here. We are on session 1 right now, right here, install and configure PAL. And in the future sessions, we're going to go through even more stuff. We're going to talk about project and project model management. So once you've harnessed a bunch of data about project models, how do you manage that and work with that? We're going to talk in depth about portal dashboards, though we'll take a quick glance at them today. We are going to, after we do the basic portal dashboards, if you want us to really dig in and get this data to really mesh well with everything else you're doing, well, then we're going to start talking about the reporting API. Before that session, before the reporting API session, I'm going to recommend, if you want to go that far, and I encourage you to do so, that you just do a little bit of digging, do a little bit of YouTubing, get some essentials on how to work with Python. Because as we continue on, we're going to be using that pretty heavily, and it's better to get a little bit of a ground level knowledge ahead of time. After we do the basics of the reporting API and the basic getting started step, we're going to dig in and start using that reporting API directly in Microsoft's Power BI. Now, Power BI is not the best tool to use for storing data, but it's a quick way to start taking a look and navigating that API a little bit. And then we're going to dig in later on and talk about harvesting the Python data down as JSON files, which you can also use a Power BI and do other things with it. We're going to talk about doing something even more useful, using Python to store the data in a SQL database of your choice. We'll talk about that. And then we're going to talk about how to build a system to automatically keep that data refreshed, so that instead of Power BI taking the load of refreshing data, we're having a little routine that we've written that does that for us. So we're going to leverage that as we go through this series, a massive 8-part series here to help you get through using harness data in a meaningful way that you can actually do, that makes this attainable, all right? So first, in our first step today, we're talking installing and configuring PAL. And so first thing is we got to get it. We got to download the project activity logger so we can actually install it. So to download PAL, there's a couple of things you're probably going to want to do if you don't already have this installed. You're going to want to go to our website and navigate specifically to here to get there, https ctcsoftware.com, or just ctcsoftware.com works as well. If you don't already have a ctcsoftware.com account, then you're going to want to register for one. If you do, then you're going to want to log in so you can actually access the downloads themselves. And from inside the portal, you're basically going to use the downloads button to get your download. And I'm going to show you this, there's two choices. There's a single user or a multi-user installer depending on your needs. And we're going to talk about those right now, because I'm going to go to the website and show you this live. Everything that we're going to do, I'm going to be doing live right alongside you. So I'm going to go here to my web browser. I'm using Chrome in this case. Edge would probably be better today, but I'm just going to go ahead and use Chrome. I am already signed in here. I have an account already. The little person's all filled in blue because I'm already signed in using my fake CTC Express Tools account right there. My real email address, of course, is CTC Software. I use this just so I can show you exactly how it looks for you as well. And since I'm logged in here, there is a downloads button that will appear once I'm signed in. So if I wasn't signed in, let me log out here so you can follow along with me. If I click on the little person, it takes me to log in securely if I have a CTC account already, or I can register if I don't yet have one. So I'm going to go ahead and just log in securely. Go ahead and put in my email address one more time here. Continue. Password, I forgot. No, I didn't. I just can't talk while I'm thinking about the password, otherwise I type it in wrong. I think we probably all have problems like that here. There we go. So I'm signed in. And so again, downloads. And from here, there's the BIM Suites download, Sim Suites download, and most importantly here, the HIVE download. This is the toolkit that contains the project activity loggers, the HIVE suite. And so you can go ahead and click on download. That'll take you to the page that gives you the latest version of the HIVE download. And there's two options. There's a single user installer, there's a multi-user installer. Now, most of you are probably going to want the multi-user installer. This is useful for larger companies, but it does require administrator privileges to actually install this. If you don't have admin privileges locally, you won't be able to install this today, though I'll talk you through how you can still get it installed in the long run, okay? The single user installer, this is an important one because it only installs for the user who is signed in. It does not require admin privileges, but it's only available for the user signed in right now to the computer. So if you have multiple people sharing a workstation, this one isn't the most ideal for you. Also important, if you have some of CTC's Express tools or suites installed already, great. But then don't mix and match the two different variations. Single user and multi-user are mutually exclusive. So if you have a multi-user BIM suite and a single user HIVE today, if you download that and try and install it, they're not going to work well together. They're going to yell at you a lot. So just don't mix and match. Make sure you know which one you got. So download one of them, get that zip file. Most of you, again, probably going to want multi-user. If you have any CTC tools already, you probably have the multi-user installer. Download it, and let's move on to the next step. It's going to be a .zip file that you're going to download. So to install PAL, a couple of steps here. Step one is you're going to be extracting that downloaded .zip file, because it is a .zip file. It has some instructions baked in there. It has it has two installers, two MSIs in there. One is for something that most of us aren't going to be needing, but the other one is the actual HIVE installer itself. And you have two options once you've extracted the zip file. Option number one is you can run the CTC HIVE multi or single user setup interactively. Just double click on it, let it run, go through all the prompts, go for it, let it install. If you have admin privileges, it's probably going to ask you for some approvals on your computer. If you don't have admin privileges, it's probably going to ask you for a little password to let you do the admin privileges stuff if it's the multi-user, but whatever, right? Like that's the interactive setup. There is a second option, and the one that I'm going to use today, because I don't actually have this installed right now. I'm going to be installing this live. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the CTC HIVE. In my case, I'm going to run the single user setup, because I have all single user tools on my computer. I'm going to run this silently. I'm going to show you how to configure a script so you can run this silently. So first things first, I'm going to look and see, do I have HIVE installed? Oops. My mistake, I actually had it installed. So I'm going to uninstall it right now. It's not going to be installed. I don't want it there. And I'm also going to go ahead and kill the file that we're going to be putting here a little later on. So I don't have HIVE. HIVE is not on my system. Revit is closed, and I am here going to install HIVE, which is going to give me the project activity logger. That's the key thing that I want here, is the project activity logger for today's purposes. But I'm also going to have the HIVE CMS, and I'm going to have the HIVE project standards module today. But we're going to only talk about PAL. So first things first, I need to install it. Where do I have this? Well, I have this in a folder, in my case, sitting on my system, where I have all of the CTC MSI files sitting side by side by side. Right here is my HIVE single user MSI file. And if you double click on this to run it interactively, of course, it's going to pop up the typical installation window, and you're going to click next, 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 and it's going to run the installer if you're using single user. If you're using multi-user, it's going to ask you for some admin privileges, and then you're going to go next, 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 and you're going to be good to go. So again, I told you that I'm going to run this silently, however. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cancel out of this installer. And let's go here to a little script. We're going to talk about building up an installation script. So the first thing you're going to do is make a new text document right next to this. And the reason why I'm doing this is because it makes it really fast then in the future to install and keep it up to date and make sure that I can push this to a lot of people all at once. So I'm going to call this HIVE install.bat. Okay, go ahead and change that extension. Oh, I don't want to run the .bat yet. I'm going to right click and I'm going to edit this .bat file, which really opens me up into Notepad, right? This is just Notepad on my computer. And there is a fairly simple little script that you can run to install this silently. What you're going to really do is tell this that you want to execute an MSI file. The command is actually MSI exec. And you're going to be installing this file. You're going to use a /I switch on it, and you're going to give it the name of the MSI file itself. So I'm just going to copy and paste this in here, and I'm going to tell it that I want it to go quietly, so it's /Q. Now, all of this is in the PDF that is sitting right next to the MSI file when you first extract that zip file I didn't read that little exec file because I already know this. I've done this many, many times in the past. In fact, I have a little bat file up here that does a couple of more advanced things, but we're going to go ahead and just use this here real quick to make this install quietly. So I'm just going to go ahead and save this file, save and close, and I'm going to run this bat file. And what this does on my other monitor is it actually runs this little script. You could do this from a command line, you could do it whatever, but what you'll see happens is it now just appears here in my apps and features like magic. It installs it, and that's pretty fantastic. So if you're using the single user installer, you can actually install both Hive single, and you can do the CTC BIM suites single if you want to as well, or you can do this for the two multi installers. And if I double click that, it would install both. And when I get updates, I could double click this again and it would install the updates as well. So that's a way of running the installation of this in a much more efficient way and a silent way, okay? Now, once this is installed, let me go to the next step here. You need to configure Project Activity Logger. So let's talk about how to configure it, because it's just, right now, it's just going to run in the background. It's going to do what it's supposed to do, but it doesn't know what to do because we haven't told it anything whatsoever. So let's talk about configuring the Project Activity Logger. Now, one of the things that you're going to need to do is download the config file. There's a configuration file that goes along with this, and you're going to place this configuration file ultimately in the correct path. And this has to happen, the installation for PAL and the config file has to be pushed to all user computers where you're expecting to be, logging data for these users. And this is why I recommend this script, because I can install Hive, but I can at the same time push the config file to the correct location. Now that correct location is C users public CTC software licensing. It's the same whether you're on single user or multi-user, it does not matter. That's the path where this file is going to get pushed to. And the trick here is if you're installing PAL silently or Hive silently, you can push that settings file at the same time. Now, first off, we got to go get that config file. So where do we get that from? Well, you get that from the same place where you got the downloads, basically. So on the CTC portal here, you're going to actually go into one sub area here. It's the projects collection of stuff. We're going to be digging into this more in our next session. But first, you're going to drop down here into settings, and you're going to download the config file. Now, these web portal settings, you can change these whenever you want to. You can turn off or on logging. You can change summarized or details warnings. I recommend summarized. It's way better, in my opinion. But that does not affect the config file itself. You don't have to re-download or re-push. The download config here basically tells the Project Activity Logger which organization to which that data belongs. And so it knows where to log it. If it doesn't have a config file, it won't do anything. It'll just sit there doing nothing. Won't run, won't do anything at all. So I'm going to go ahead and download this config file. This is just a JSON file, hiveconfig.json, this file here. And as I mentioned in the little PowerPoint here, this needs to get put to a specific location. Now, I'm not going to manually put it there. I could. I'm not going to manually put it there. And I'm not going to manually put it there because I don't want to have to go to every single one of my users' computers and run the installer and then manually copy that file, because that's not that efficient to do that one step at a time manually. I might forget to put the config file and then things won't work right. So instead, I am going to use that settings file, that script file to actually put this someplace. Now, I've already actually downloaded my hiveconfig.json. It's sitting right here, sitting right next to that hiveinstall.bat that we had. And what I'm going to do is tell this hiveinstall.bat, I'm going to edit this one more time, and I'm going to tell this to run a copy. This is actually a DOS command, copy. I'm going to tell it what to copy, hiveconfig.json, and I'm going to tell it where to go, which is this path right here, C users public CTC software licensing. And in fact, I'm going to copy and paste that so that I don't have to type it out, because none of y'all want to watch me type that out. That's no fun. So I'm on my other screen right now, just grabbing that text, copy, and because there's a space in that path, right here, because there's a space in here, we're going to put this in quotation marks so that Windows knows what to do with this. Now, when I double click on hive install.bat, it's going to run the MSI exec and install Hive silently if it's not already there. If it is, it just ends quickly. And then it's going to copy the hive config.json. All right. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and save this file, and I'm going to double click on hive install.bat. It's going to pull up a little DOS window. It went so quickly I couldn't even pull it across for you to see it. But what it did is it threw that hive config.json over here. It just did it for me. In fact, if I delete this file here, let's just delete that. And let's just, for fun, because installing and uninstalling stuff is super fun, we're going to go ahead and uninstall Hive real quick here. And we're going to do this one more time just so you can see all of this happen magically all in one step. So we're going to have the licensing window pulled up here, make it really skinny and set it right next to my add apps and features, and we're just going to run hive install.bat. And it's going to go ahead and run that. It's going to install it. Hive is going to appear here. There it is, Hive single user installer. This is the version right now 24.5, and you may have also seen that in the background window here, the hive config.json shows up. So we have everything that we need. All right, that's it. We're done. Now, when a user runs this, now this is again a single user installer that I ran. So because I ran this as myself, this is going to work for me. Now, if you guys are working in a more of a professional environment where you're all like have IT who installs things, you won't be running the single user installer. You'll be running the multi-user installer so IT can push it. They'll have heightened privileges. They can get that all set up and ready to rock, and it will apply to all users of a computer. That config.json, that already goes to a public folder, right? This isn't going to a user-specific folder. It's going to public, which means all users reference that same folder. So we're good. We're safe. If this is a virtual machine, it's all good. Everything's all kinds of happy here. All right. So that Hive install can be run either as a multi-user with the multi-user file or the single user, and it installs differently. Again, the multi requires heightened admin privileges. This config file copy into public does not require any kind of privileges. It'll just copy whether you got admin privileges or not. Okay, we're basically done with installations. So I can shut down both of those windows, just close that out. I can close this because my Hive is now running as it is supposed to be. And we're going to talk now about verifying data logging. We want to make sure that when we use stuff now in Revit and do Revit projects, that this is actually sending data correctly and doing what it's supposed to be doing. So let's talk about how we can verify that we know that this is working so we set ourselves up for success for the next session. So one of the things that I like to do on the computer when I first interactively set this up, I like to use the PAL configuration command to actually test this. Now, I can't share this because my start bar is on my other screen, but I am just going to type in at the little search bar there, PAL config, and when you type that in, it's going to open up or give you access to this little tool right here, the PAL configuration tool. And in this little PAL configuration tool, you know it's the correct one here, has a little Hive logo on it. When you click test, if you've done everything that you're supposed to do, this should come back as successful, complete and result successful. And that's it. I know that my installation went off without a hitch. It worked perfectly. My config file is in the right place, and I'm done. If I just click save and move on, this thing's just going to work. It's going to do everything it's supposed to do. I could also just click close and move on. It doesn't matter because it's already got the right settings. Now, one of the things that we probably also can use here is we can watch this little queue folder. In fact, I'm going to advance this forward just a little bit. You can watch the queue folder. And the queue folder is located typically at local app data. It'll automatically make a folder for the end user who's signed in, and it queues up their settings into the CTC software PAL queue folder, specifically the cloud subfolder, because that's what the Hive PAL little toolkit here does. And so if we go take a look at that location, I'm just going to copy and paste that path. In fact, let's open up a Windows Explorer window here. Just paste, there we go. Oop, close that. I hit a wrong button. That's glorious. That is fantastic. Try this one more time. Paste, local app data, CTC software, PalQ cloud, go. There we go. Mine's already got some stuff in here because I've been using this for a while. Let's delete that, clear it out. Yours will start out being empty if you go to this folder. It'll be empty at first, but we're going to go there. This folder will get created when you first install Hive. That folder will be ready and waiting for the PAL to actually start throwing stuff in here. So this is another visual way of validating. So I'm going to check that out while we're running Revit here in just a moment, because we're going to visually make sure that it works. As we are actually logging data, you can also check for the data to appear in the portal's dashboards. You can actually navigate to CTC software/portal/dashboard, or since you're already signed in to the site and you're already in the portal itself, you just click the little person right there. The very first place it drops you is actually on the dashboard. And you can begin navigating through here specifically in projects, and probably specifically just in project summary here. You'll start seeing some information show up. You can actually look at overview as well. If you have had no data for PAL ever, this will be completely empty. And then as you're working, you'll start to see information appear in this portal over time as you and your users are working, okay? So, all right, within here, let's actually test this out. Let's give this a try and check to see if this is working. So I'm going to pull up this little folder right here on the left. This is my PalQ Cloud folder. I am going to intentionally now open up Revit itself, and we're going to keep an eye on this folder while Revit opens and while we're opening a project and see what happens. Because if this is all working as it's supposed to, stuff should appear in this folder, and then most of the stuff should disappear out of the folder. In fact, I just saw something flicker here. It had a little bit of information that showed up, and then it disappeared. And then in fact, in this case, there's a log session object that just appeared here with the GUID. This won't disappear right away. This will take a while until I shut down Revit, but it'll be there. There's also a session ID sitting here as well. Now, in Revit over here, let's make this just a bit smaller. I'm going to go ahead and open up a project. I'm going to do it wrong. I'm just going to, not wrong, I'm going to do it the lazy way. I'm going to open it right off of the cover page here and just open up this local copy, overwrite my existing copy, and let it do its thing. I don't like opening it up that way because it doesn't give me the ability to actually choose to audit a file, which I like to do on a regular basis. And the PAL will actually monitor that and see if I am actually opening with an audit. And you'll see some more information showing up over here and disappearing. The log session object appeared, disappeared. There's now an event here, an event that says I'm opening up a project, and a bunch of information shows up, information about the warnings in this project and views and things like that. And eventually, those will get logged to the portal as well. Inside of here also, if I do syncs to central or navigate to a different view, like if I go to a floor plan view, it'll track that I did that, and it'll watch how much time I spent in that view. So you can see how much time certain tasks are happening in certain areas and projects. Are people spending a lot of time doing detailing versus doing floor plan development or section development or you name it? Again, that stuff just got logged already. It logs in the background, doesn't affect my Revit session at all. The user of Revit doesn't have to do anything special. They just work like normal. They don't even know this is happening, which is glorious. But for you, the BIM managers who want this information to help you make better decisions, well, you're able to just get this served up for you on a silver platter with no effort really after you've got Hive installed. Hive, in this case, the PAL portion is what we're focusing on. Now, again, I'm going to do one more thing here. I'm going to do a sync to central. Go ahead and click OK on that. Give up, control of everything that I own. It's going to run the sync to central, tracks that I did that particular event. It tracks how long it took, and then it logs it. That's as simple as this is. We're basically done with this particular little portion of the configuration. If you do this silent install across all your user computers, by the next session of this series, you'll already have a lot of rich data that we can use to actually begin setting up projects, begin looking at some data. Oh, one more thing. I didn't do this one yet. You can check the portal dashboards. Now, it's not going to appear immediately. It takes a little while for the hamsters to run on their wheels and for the data to actually appear in the dashboard, because I don't want to just kill performance every time somebody syncs to Central, have an entire web page update, right? Like, that's not ideal. So it does take, usually about 15, 20 minutes before you see the actual last save. But over time, what you'll see is a lot of rich data that's going to be there over time. And so if we go back to that web page here real quick, like if I refresh right now, F5, I'm not necessarily going to see that particular last event. In fact, if I go here to the project that I've already, let's go to model performance for that particular project, okay? I do have a save from earlier today at 9:34 a.m. I don't have the one that I just did at 12:30 p.m. today, right? That'll show up here in a little bit. But I do have data from earlier today. It's already in this system. I have a sync to Central that happened at 8:54, one that happened at 9:34, and then I shut everything down and uninstalled everything and prepped for today's webinar. And so you'll also see some opening times here. Again, I don't have the open from about 10, 15 minutes ago. Well, maybe not quite that long ago, but I will see that show up here. And I'll start to see things like the file size as it changes over time, if I was actually making any changes to my models and increasing file sizes or changing of warnings or anything like that. You'll be able to start navigating through this dashboard. And we're going to dig deep into this in part 3 of this webinar series. We'll actually go through these and what they mean and some information you can glean from it after we've done some project organization, as I've already done here. So we'll do some more of that in a future session. Okay, but you can verify that you've got data showing up. Give it about a half hour before you go looking for it, but it'll be there. And you forget about it for a couple of days and then just come back and take a look and you'll see information. It'll be glorious when you start seeing data just show up there available for your use. So where are we again in this series? Well, today we talked about installing and configuring the project activity logger, PAL. In our next session coming up real soon here, we're going to be talking about project and project model management. That's the next part, and then we'll continue on with the series in future sessions. So please keep an eye on our events page, or if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe to the channel so that, and hit that little bell thing so that when we do publish that, you're able to either participate with us live in the event or be notified when it goes live on the YouTube channel in case you can't be there live in the actual event. Now, we're about to jump into Q&A, but for those of you who don't hang out for Q&A, or those of you who are watching the recording, I want to say thank you. We always appreciate when you do show up live or spend some time, in your day checking out information that you can use in powerful ways like what we talked about today. We do hope to see you back in the future.